My laptop.
We all remember recess growing up in school. Recess was a time of day where you could have all the conversations that you could not have while in class. Recess is where you had the real conversations. And real conversations we're going to have. In each episode of the Recess podcast, I'm going to have real conversations explaining students and school. I'm David McGuire, and I'll be your host. It's recess time, y'all. Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Recess Podcast. I'm your host, David McGuire. I'm calling this the golden episode 13th, on the 13th. And you're welcome to Education This Time. Again, this is the Recess Podcast, stands for Real Education Conversations, explaining students in school. And so we're going to have us a real conversation. I got some good folks with me. If you're a first-time listener, want you to like and share this video. Also, hop into the comments. We love to engage. Otherwise, we're going to have us a good conversation. Shout out those that have tuned in on a regular. But before we jump into the topics, I'm going to have my two guests or / co-hosts, Ashley and Aaron, introduce themselves. So introduce yourself, what role you serve in, and then why you selected education. So we'll start with the lady first, Miss Ashley.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. McGuire, for having me on your show finally. I've been following you for a while, but I'm Ashley Ford. I am a special ed educator in Pike Township. It's my second year of middle school, but I have years of experience with high school, so I'm happy to be here.
Welcome. Aaron, what's up, brother?
I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much, David. I'm glad to finally be on the podcast. I'm Aaron Mickens. I'm the Dean of Culture at the Purdue Polytechnic High School downtown location. Just opened up a new building. Come check us out. Why education? Believe it or not, when I attended the HBCU in Arkansas, when I was down there, I'm not sure if you guys are too familiar with the South. There's there's not many of us educators, especially in Arkansas. And I was an English major. I volunteered some time through my organization, and I went into the school, and the kids looked at me like they've never seen a black male in the building. You know, there's not many. So that caught my eye, and I knew that was my calling. It was my time to get in the building and to show our youth we could be more.
Absolutely. Well, I love it. So again, I got two
He froze.
Get them on. And before we jump into the main topic, today's article of the week, and I'm gonna put it on the screen. But there's this post, so it says, "Teachers, our words can re-traumatize our black students," and we all been there. We had those moments in school where we use some choice words. But now, when you think about everything that's happening, right, and society, whether it's, the pandemic with COVID or the pandemic of the murder of black people, we have to be very careful when we get back to school, whether it's in a virtual setting or in person, about how careful we are with our words, because our children have gone through a lot during this time. They've been out of school 147 some odd days or something since March 13th when they shut us down. So when you guys read the article, that's a long time. When you guys read the article, what resonated with you? What caught your eye as you read through this?
Just the words, actually, I didn't have too many teachers have anything negative to say about me growing up. So I think I'm one of the few, but just that social emotional aspect and trauma, and knowing that we have so many kids who deal with trauma pre-COVID, and now we just have to be a little bit more cognizant of their emotional well-being.
Well said, Ashley. And I want to point out a quote that Kwame stated in the article. And he said he was reminded of how the words have the power to perpetuate the racialized trauma that so many of our black students endure through their K-12 schooling. And as I went through and I looked at some of the words he was referring to, words like defiant, hyperactive, oppositional, and those words that are even today are said to our young black and brown children specifically, and it just hits home. So as a child, as with Kwame, I also remember hearing some of those same words, and I can relate to exactly what he was saying, and just how powerful those words can mean. And he talked about, like I said, the focus language versus the solution focused language, and just the difference between the two. Problem focused language, versus solution focused language, which is, as an educator, which is powerful. Imagine giving that to our teachers and our young leaders.
Yeah.
And you know what else? What hits this is it's what the words that Black teachers use to Black kids, right? So it's one thing for them to be traumatized by white teachers, right? It's another thing. This Black man use harsh words, or you see a Black woman, and kids are sitting there and they're getting they're getting traumatized, right, by people that look like them. And I think that's why, like, even now, again, I keep saying this, like, this is definitely a time where Black educators have to really look in the mirror about not only the words we use, but even how we carry ourselves, right? So I know this talked about words particularly, but like just the way we carry ourselves in the building, right? Our demeanor, our mannerism, like the way we show up. Because most of our Black kids, you know, I have kids in my school that they've seen Black men and Black women come in and out of their lives. And so they can't get that same thing from school. So when they go through 3 or 4 teachers and 3 of them are Black, right? That just repeats the cycle they see at home, these people coming in and out of their lives. And so, I mean, this is a very present time, but this was definitely a timely article. Definitely, again, give you something to think about. So if you haven't checked it out, it's on Education Post. Again, it's kind of titled, Teachers, Our Words Can Re-Traumatize Our Black Students. So,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So, not to interrupt you, David, but as a special ed teacher, like a lot of our Black and brown kids have been labeled, you know, defiant or oppositional. And you see an oversaturation of our Black boys in particular being labeled as, you know, emotionally, you know, handicapped and I'm just like, no, if you take the time and build that relationship with them, then they're not oppositional or defiant. You have to build that relationship with them. And when I was in high school, when I worked at Northwest High School, I had one class, I had 6 kids who were labeled, you know, EH, and I didn't have a single behavior problem out of them because I took the time to establish those relationships. Did they have their moments? Yes. But I knew what those triggers were. And so I'm like, hey, do you need a minute? Here's a stress ball. Use a hot pass. I know they try not to use that much now because some kids have to use that as like a crutch. But I'm like, hey, if you don't want to feel comfortable talking to me, go ahead and go down the hall and talk to the dean or step outside and calm down and, you know, refocus, regroup, come back in. But I have kids all the time who have those, you know, those little moments, but I just don't like that we all over-identify our Black boys, and that, like you said, this perpetuates that trauma because they hear it at home, and then, they'll come in the school in class one day, and the teacher's like, oh, this person is here, and that already sets the tone for the class. The kid hasn't done nothing yet.
Yeah,
probably having a good day until that teacher made that comment, and so even I had to check myself sometimes because there'd be some days I'm like, you know what? I'm not dealing with your mess today.
Not today. And you even said it with Black boys, but if you see, I mean, I know you guys saw the article about the Black girl who was jailed for not doing her virtual learning.
Yeah.
I mean, Push Out said it best, right? The criminalization of Black girls as well, right? Particularly in school. And I didn't realize until I started seeing some research and even reading the book and seeing the documentary, how much schools are like criminalizing Black girls. I'm like, dang, like, but they arrested this girl for not doing her virtual learning. Again, that's another topic for another day, but we're going to jump in.
Definitely.
We're going to jump into the education this time. And again, so for those that don't know me, I am a huge James Baldwin fan. And so if you hear the education next time, it kind of coins from James Baldwin's work, The Fire Next Time, but also from Jasmine Ward, who wrote The Fire This Time. So the question is, what will education be like this time? This is unprecedented, right? Because in the middle of the year, school ended. If you remember back in 2005, we had Hurricane Katrina, right? That closed schools closed schools in New Orleans, disrupted the whole system, right? In New Orleans. This time, though, we had a global and national pandemic that disrupted education across the country, particularly in Indianapolis. So as we enter the education, when we think about the race relations and this idea of creating more anti-racist schools and in our classroom, the question is, will education be different this time? And so let me ask you this. Think about the educator you were before school closed, and do you feel that educator is prepared to enter the classroom this time around?
I would say it strongly, it goes around what have you done to prepare and who has helped you prepare. And I'll more so go for us as educators at Purdue, where I'm at now. And shout out to our organization, Scott Best, Shatoya Ward. They've done an amazing job of providing us the resources and the things that we need to be successful while coming back into the school environment. once again, this is a pandemic that no one ever has experienced before. It's something that we all are still learning to cope with. And working for such a great organization makes things so much easier. But at the same time, what am I doing to help prepare myself to go back into the building? And like I said, to me, it revolves around those two things. What are they doing for you, and what are you doing for them to better come, especially if you're serving families. We're serving students and families who we have no idea how the pandemic has affected them. So we have to prepare ourselves to handle those students. So it really does alter your mindset a little bit. And for those who know me, they know I'm as strict as can be. These are my expectations. I expect you to meet them, and how can I help you get them? But even now, it's having a soul. I mean, to understand, you have to having a soul to.
You have to have that empathy. Yeah.
Empathy. For what the students have gone through, losing grandparents, parents, friends, aunts, uncles, cousins.
You just gave me chills.
I mean, everybody. I mean, people are losing everybody left and right. Even today, 68 new cases, some amount of deaths every day. You're looking at the news, all you see are cases, death. So, it's crazy.
Yeah. Actually, before you jump in, I think we always talk about giving each other grace and patience, right? But y'all said it. It's the word empathy, right? Like, we need empathy during this time. And like that's the word that always people forget to say, because it's all about grace. So actually, I'm gonna ask you the same question, right? Like, the educator you were before everything happened, is that educator equipped and ready to step into the classrooms that we're entering this time around with education?
Deep breath. Being a special ed teacher, it's hard for me because I have a lot of students who need that social interaction and to, be having small groups instruction, because I have small class sizes, and then I have students who are like all over the place when it comes to their learning disability. So before I had a system, I had a routine, and I'm not necessarily a type A person, but I have type A tendencies, and this disrupted everything. And then I was really hard on myself. I'm like, how am I going to still give those accommodations, those services to my caseload of 40 students? And so I had to think about what you just said, Aaron. What are they going through at home? I've had students who've had loved ones who were diagnosed. We had faculty members who got it. Luckily, everybody, has made almost a full recovery. I had family members. I had 6 who contracted COVID. One was hospitalized. Thankfully, he's okay, but he was high risk. So it's just giving myself that grace and empathizing with my students and my other faculty, because our SPED department, we did a lot of training over the summer on what to do when we come back in the classroom and if we're going into online learning. And I am very, very blessed that Pike Township has stepped it up, and we are making it work. I had a lot of apprehension going into this first week of school. I didn't sleep well Monday night. I'm gonna just put it out there. I was like, oh my God, when am I gonna, because I have a math lab, English language arts lab, and a resource. And I don't see the same kids, but a lot of them do have those classes. I'm like, okay, how can I teach, reteach these standards? Like, what are we gonna review? So the first few days, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? What can I do to assist you virtually? So at this point, I'm not really worried about standards and teaching. I want to make sure that they are okay and extending that grace, because I've had some colleagues, and I don't want to go on a tangent here, when we were at training, like, oh, they need to make sure they're wearing a uniform, make sure the camera's on. If they are logged in and they're interacting, whether or not you can see them or not, give that kid grace, because you don't know what's going on at home.
It's funny you said that. I wrote a piece because I saw that graphic, and I don't know, this is where I need to find my own grace and my own empathy. But I wrote an article, and I said, I understand why schools make kids turn their cameras on. I do. And I think they should turn their cameras on. I think they should, right? I mean, listen, it's controversial. I know. Listen, I got lit up in my inbox. That's okay. But I'm going to say this. I'm going to stand firm. I feel like schools should require kids to turn their cameras on. Now, what I will say is this. We're not suspending kids for turning their cameras on, first of all.
Okay.
I'm not punishing no kid.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, what you're supposed to be doing is teaching them right? Proper etiquette. Because if we are, again, I don't know about y'all, but my teachers, we got to turn our cameras on when we have a video conference or whatever, right?
Right.
And so we have to teach them that digital norms and literacy. But I will say again, I'm not saying we punish kids, because what are you going to kick a kid off virtual learning because it's camera on? Like, I mean, I literally tell somebody
but you can though.
But you can.
But kick them out of the room.
But that's asinine. But I'll say this: I think you have to balance, and we got some comments here, so I want to make sure I get people.
Oh, where are the comments? Okay,
right here. He said, too many educators will fall into the category of giving sympathy and not empathy, which can further hinder students' growth in the long run. Yes, right, and that's why I think empathy has to be part of that grace and patience. And your brother, who was on one of my shows earlier, said we will not fall into that trap. Balance between high expectations and empathy. Yeah.
Let me tell you why I think. I think empathy helps more so with COVID-19 because a lot of us were able to relate to it. So a lot of us had some type of connection to it, which I think where empathy can help us in a way. And I agree with what Sean said about the sympathy and empathy, which we all talk about. So I really appreciate that he said that, because educators will do that. They'll feel sorry. They will, in the end of the day, that's what they'll feel sorry for a child, and that can really affect the way. And then all of a sudden, we're lowering expectations. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. You don't have to turn your camera on. You don't have to turn this in today. You don't have to turn this into tomorrow. And like even with the camera situation, we utilize a system called Behavior Flip to track some systems in my school that I want to bring on. And you believe it or not, one of the biggest infractions I see are students not turning their cameras on.
What? Listen, I'm with you again. I want the camera on, but I'm not about to, punish or give an infraction or ridicule a kid for. I'm gonna say, listen, when you get
make sure the cameras are on.
When you get to my age and you go in an interview and it's virtual, I can't have a virtual meeting with my camera off, right?
Oh, again, you can't. You won't get the job. I don't know why you
not at all.
I can't do this, right? I turn my camera off and I'm doing a show. This is not proper etiquette, right? And so that's what we got to teach our kids. But real quick, because I want to get through the questions. I'm gonna put this. Aaron, your brother said something. Again, it's my favorite saying. Kids gotta learn, man. Kids gotta learn. Kids gotta learn no matter what. Kids gotta learn. So I'm gonna jump into the next question. Ashley, I want you to answer this one first. So, what will education be like this time? Should it change? How should it change? And what do you feel it will be like this time? So, like first, like the whole system. So let's just do our locale, right? Let's just think about the Indianapolis education system for Black kids. What will it be like this time? And should it change?
Well, this brings up the question of equity.
That word.
we know we have a lot of underserved students, particularly of color, regardless of IPS, township, whatever. So before we can get to point A, we got to make sure that's equitable. We need to make sure these students have access to technology, and then make sure they, have internet access, Wi-Fi hotspot or whatever. And like I said, Pike is really doing that, making sure that there's hotspots. How can we serve you to make sure that the kids are even able to turn the camera on?
Hey, but listen, man, even with that, somebody said about the cameras and watch, they just said like, when you have multiple people on the Wi-Fi, it slows it down, and I get all that, right? And I think that's the piece that we have to consider as well. So Aaron, I'm gonna go to you, man, because I think I kind of know what you're gonna say, but
I wasn't finished, but it's okay.
Oh, my bad.
Now I can talk.
But
I don't.
We're gonna go back to you. Go ahead.
So you said, should it change? No, I want to go back into the classroom, but I think technology keeps moving forward, and so I think our students need to learn how to do classes online. There was a post in the Facebook group for Pike educators that our high school students, they're starting to get some of that experience when they get to the collegiate level, because you might have some classes that are all virtual. You might meet once or twice, however many times in the semester, but I think they need to learn how to have that etiquette and know how to, learn online and just be able to interact distancing if that's the word we're going to use. So I think it'll change in that where we'll see more online classes, but I don't want it to take away from the traditional mainstream classroom setting because, like I said, I'm a special ed teacher. Mm-hmm. We have kids who need to learn, who learn differently, and this virtual is not really conducive. So we have to be even more creative and making sure that we are bridging those education gaps. And also, I don't lose funding. If everybody's at home, where's this money going?
Well, in the pre-show, Aaron and I talked about where the money may go, and we probably will touch that a little later. But actually, real quick before I go to Aaron, I want to ask you. So, what you're saying is you can see a space where there is this hybrid model that everybody's been talking about of
absolutely
providing kids that avenue of virtual, that option of virtual. But I can also see it where you see kids in their junior, maybe senior years, majority of their classes do go to virtual, where you see a high school that is now really just 9th and 10th graders full time in the building, and then you see maybe some junior and senior classes that can be done virtually, where you see kids go half day in person, but then there are other 2 classes are virtually, or like you said, to prep for that college as well. So that's a good point, because what you're going to see is you might see a lot of kids go to work, right? And then you see these classes online, right? Because they don't have to do the live piece, and now it's the way you do it in college, right? That could be a high school model. So I agree, to that. I did
most of my master's online.
See, exactly, and you a lot of programs.
Discipline.
That discipline, because if kids can't even turn their camera on in high school, how they go? Anyway, I'm gonna get off the camera, everybody. You know what, Vashawn, man, listen. Everybody know, man, I can't get my internet right in certain spots, man. It is all in Naptown, but we're working on it. We got some funds happening. So, Aaron, I'm gonna go to you, man. The questions are simple. What will education be like this time? Should it change? And how should it change?
Let me tell you why we need our kids back in school, because in the Black community, I'm being honest, our community truly does not value education like the way we should. Ooh. We've already started school. When I tell you the amount of students that we don't have show up, our African American kids are not coming to school because their parents are not valuing the education that they need. They talk about, I'm working. I'm not about to get up. This virtual, I'll show up to class when I want to. I don't know how to send my child to school. I don't know. I can't get them up. I don't know what to do. What do I say to him, Mr. Mickens? What do I do? Man, we got to get our Black and brown kids back in the buildings, because at the end of the day, if their parents don't want it for them, we gonna want it for them, because we have to make the difference, and we have to set the example to set them up for success. Because at the end of the day, virtual does not work right now for our community. It doesn't work right now the way it should for our community, because a lot of times we don't have the resources that people on 196th Street has. The people on Meridian in the Briar area going towards those school buildings over there. A lot of our kids don't have so when they come to school, they have us to provide them those resources. Or it's not even a poverty thing all the time. It's, do you value it? Because you can have someone, a Black fan that lives on 96th Street or wherever, and they still don't value education the way we want them to value education. So when we're doing this virtual hybrid thing, I feel like our students are being left in the dark at the end of the day, because whether their families had a bad experience, but along the line, something's not happening.
All right, so I'm gonna push you a little bit, right? Because it's the Recess Podcast, and we're supposed to have real education conversation. So you said something that I think a lot of Black people would take offense to, right? When you say, the Black community doesn't value education, right? And I don't. So I'm gonna push you too, Ashley. Like, I'm about to push both of y'all, right? And I'm gonna get these comments up, because
I grew up in the hood, and I can tell you how many kids will leave their house.
But my question is, and in India, I'm gonna read your comment, because literally I was thinking the same thing. So India said that's not a Black thing, it's a poverty thing, and we can't say it because poor people don't value education. Maslow hierarchy. So because I didn't think it was a Black thing. I think it was either it's a socioeconomic thing, right? Where I don't know if people in the lower socioeconomics value education. I think Black people value education. I think many Black people have seen what education does. Now, how they get there, you know, and I don't know, but I do.
That's where the equity piece comes in.
Yeah, I feel Black people value education. Now, again, I hear you, right? And so I'm gonna get these. Education must be a priority in our community. Again, I believe education is a priority. I think it's the access to education might not be the priority, but it's not a priority because they don't want it. It's because.
But David, let me tell you. So let me speak. So India, I get you. My wife's from Jamaica. I'm not sure if too many people know Jamaica, been in Jamaica. And Jamaica is not the richest country. You have people on all statuses just like here. But in that nation, in Jamaica, where they're Black, not African American, they're Black, right? Just like us. It don't matter what, if you're rich, poor, middle class, in that nation, they value education. They value education in most of the Caribbean countries that are, you know, considered Black. They value education, and because at the end of the day, in that country, they want better for their children. They want better. So it don't matter what level you're on.
Let me ask both of y'all. I'm gonna ask both of y'all a simple question. Define for me what it means to value education. Like, give me that, because maybe I'm missing that. Tell me what it means to value education. Ashley, go ahead.
India, I think she made the comment that it's not a Black thing, it's a
poor thing. Yeah, I'm gonna go to.
Yeah, it's a poor thing. Mm-hmm. I don't disagree with her. I think she's right, because socioeconomic status and education kind of, you know, they're mutually, you know, they go hand in hand. But I'm just going based off of my experiences, so maybe I'm being more subjective than objective here. But when I worked at high school, guess which kids didn't show up to school?
Don't say it.
The Black kids.
But what if most of the schools Black? What if most of the schools Black?
No. When I worked in IPS.
Okay. I'm just asking.
I had a mixture. Now I had more brown students.
Yeah. Okay.
I had, you know, a few, you know, white students, but it was my Black kids who was like, why do I need to be here? I don't need to do this. Now I did have some, you know, brown students who would be like, Amos Ford, I wasn't here because I had to go work at my family's, you know, business. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, but you still need to come to school and get that diploma and then go handle your business. So I'm trying to be as politically correct here.
No, listen, this is the Research Podcast. You say what you gotta say. Now, protect your job though, but say what you gotta say. Go ahead.
But here's why Ashley's thinking about her point. What, to me, at the end of the day, what status? Okay, you can have statuses, but it comes down to what are you gonna do? Whether you're rich, poor, medium class, it's all about the drive you have inside of you and who's helping you push that drive. So it's not, like I said, I understand Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or whatever. By saying it's not, when I say Black community, we always see you're talking about the whole Black community. That's not true. There are members in our Black community, in the white community, in the Hispanic community, in the Asian community that don't value education. But I'm speaking about my Black community because I'm Black. I'm not white. I'm not Asian. I'm not Hispanic. So that's why I'm referring to my Black community and what I see.
Listen, y'all got folks in here turned up, which is good, right? This is you know what? We're gonna come back to that.
And yes, India, she's right. It was built like none of the systems were for us.
No, and so again, my homegirl Tanisha Peoples wrote a dope piece about basically the government running us our money, right? So we can rebuild our freedom schools, or in a sense, the Black schools. And if you go back to, like, there's a book called, and I read it with Charles Cole from the A Black Hands, Education for Blacks in the South. And it talked about the first public schools were built by Black people. These schools that we have now ain't built for us, weren't built for us, aren't built by us, right? They might be ran by us. I'm one of those people who
the
run
only
one of these
school we
schools.
had in Indianapolis was Crispus Attucks.
Right. And you see what happened with that. But I think what everybody's getting into is like this idea when you say we don't value, and again, Aaron, me, Ashley, India, Vashawn, everybody is talking about we're all in the same Black community. And so I think when you say the Black people in our community don't value education, that's what got people turned up. But again, I love it. I think it's great. Vashawn said, let it fly. No PC. because it's the Recess Podcast, and we let
I like
fly.
to cuss.
We'll cuss. Shoot, we can edit it.
No, it just pisses me off that so many of our Black students are really just kind of nonchalant about it. I'm just like, do you not have?
Well, I'm gonna say this.
Aspirations.
Well, let me tell you why some of these Black kids are nonchalant. Because some of these whack ass Black teachers is nonchalant. We trifling too. I ain't gonna let some Black teachers out the hood because there's some trifling ass Black teachers teaching too.
I agree.
You said that these schools. So you said that these schools weren't built for us. Okay.
Nah, they ran by us.
Right. So you said they weren't built for us, right? I want to go back. India, I love the comments. India said that she said that Jamaicans created the system. Well, let me correct that. The British system is what's created in Jamaica and the Bahamas. So the British is the one that created that system. So the British system created that. So the Jamaicans are following the British system, and the British are not Black; they're white. The system wasn't built for them; it was built for the British.
It's definitely a white,
right? But the Jamaicans,
European perspective,
right? If you've never been with somebody from the Caribbean or wherever, trust me, the system wasn't built for them either. But regardless, they're doing what they got to do, and I just want the same for us.
No. So we're gonna move on, and I'm a jump. I want
to talk to India. I need to pick her brain.
Listen, India, if you're still there, put your she's Thrival Academy. Co-located with Arlington Middle School.
Yes, we saw that song. Shout out to y'all music video.
Out there jiggling. All right, so look, I'm gonna rearrange the topics because I think the direction we're going, I think we want to stay with this. So Ibram X. Kendi wrote an essay that was published in the Atlantic where he linked the disproportionality high number of COVID-19 related deaths among Black people to police killings of Black men and women. We all know that in addition to education this time, we will be different due to COVID, but also this idea of anti-racism. So Kendi wrote this: to be Black and conscious of anti-Black racism is to stare into the mirror of your own extinction. Ask the souls of the 10,000 Black victims of COVID-19 who might still be living if they had been white. Ask the souls of those who were told the pandemic was the great equalizer. Ask the souls of those forced to choose between their low-wage jobs and their treasured life. Ask the souls of those blamed for their own death. Ask the souls who were disproportionately lost their jobs and their life as others disproportionately raged about losing their freedom to infect us all. Ask the souls of those ignored by the governors to reopen states. So that was a lot there. So I'll say this. What does anti-racist teaching and education look like this time as we enter the upcoming school year?
Schools must be intentional and thoughtful. And it has to be a lifelong commitment. Those are the three things. It has to be intentional, thoughtful, and lifelong commitment. Not just, hey, let's do this 30-minute PD about anti-racism.
No, no.
And then it's
you can't do over 400 years of systemic racism in 30 minutes. You cannot.
Ooh.
But they're going to try.
Listen, I went to the Racial Institute when I worked at IPS. It was a 2-day. Actually, I did it twice. It was a lot to digest, and all these, the systems and how racism is social constructs. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, wow. But I'm not trying to cut you off, Aaron, but it has to be intentional. Yeah. Like I do my best, Hispanic Heritage Month, Asian Heritage Month. I try to be inclusive to all races, all nationalities, and find topics for the students to learn because I want it to be a reflection of my classroom. Now I go in a little bit more Black History Month because our kids, they just know about who? MLK and Malcolm X. They don't know about, Stokely Carmichael. They don't know about Marcus Garvey. They don't know about Shirley Chisholm. Since we got Kamala Harris, with Biden, we need to let's go back a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right. It needs to be intentional. And then you have teachers who need to take their own inputs and biases. Because I saw that a lot. And there's been times, now I got goosebumps. I had to check a few teachers. Why are you giving these Black and brown students a hard time? You give you a little bit more grace to this white kid. Is it because this kid is compliant? Or because he looks like you? So,
Aaron, when you think about, and I think you when you what does anti-racist teaching in education look like?
Well, I want to relate it back to an article I read called "Anti-Racist Work in Schools: Are You in It for the Long Haul?" And there was a quote that said, "Without careful thought and planning, schools risk alienating Black, Indigenous people of color, stakeholders, reinforcing white saviorism, and derailing the possibility of future efforts. Standards and skills can always be retaught, but school culture is too important to get wrong. Your North Star is always centering your most marginalized and under-resourced students." I mean, that when I read that, I was like, I was shook. You know, I was really shook because it's true. One thing anti-racism could lend to, if done improperly, is the white saviorism. I am one of the biggest. I cannot stand the white savior mentality, and I don't want some schools to get caught in that trap of. I know there's a book, what's it called, White Fragility, and the author spoke about if you offer that book, if you just use that book, you can't just use that book. You have to offer other resources with that is going to have continued learning throughout the year. You can't just use that book and say it's over. It doesn't stop right there. So when you're doing anti-racism, it has to be like I said, it has to be a lifelong or a year-long commitment. Not just something you do a year, but it has to be continued time after time after time. Let's say you have a teacher that comes in mid-year, right, David? Let's say you have a teacher that just didn't make it. So you have a teacher that comes in December with none of that training or none of that learning about any of that. Then what's going to happen? Now he's going to start. Those feelings or those ideas will start to cultivate again because you just did at the beginning of the year and then left it alone. Has to be something that's done the entire year.
So let me ask you guys this again, because I'm gonna push you. We're gonna go back to the not value in education. I'm stuck on this. I wrote it down. Right, that and turning cameras on. But listen, no, again, that's why I switched it.
That's why the pot.
You did, because that's why I went back. That's why I went to this one, because this was at the end and put it in the middle. Aaron, you made the comment about Black people not Black people not valuing education, right? But let me ask you this: is that not what we're talking about when anti-racist teaching? Like we shouldn't say that. Like, I mean, that's giving ammunition, right, to those white teachers and those white folks. Like we're giving them the ammunition. So I'm gonna push you again. Help me understand how we can have the mentality of Black people not value education, but say we want anti-racist teaching in our school.
So to me, the discipline between racism and honesty. And to me, I'm not saying all Black members of the community don't value education. I'm being honest, there are some members of the Black community. So if I was to say the white community doesn't value education, what would you say? If I would say the Hispanic community doesn't value education, is that still racism?
But we're talking about
is that racism? Right, but is it racism if I say the white community doesn't value education, am I being racist?
No, but you're saying if white people don't value education, are you being racist?
I'm asking, am I?
For saying it?
Yeah.
Would I call you a racist? Probably not.
And he said, got him. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you.
But my thing is, so you think, so just again, I help me understand. You think it's okay to preach anti-racist teaching, but also believe that a few Black people in the Black community don't value education?
So I'm gonna ask you. Let me ask you this question.
So you're saying you can't have both?
Who said you can't have both?
I'm asking.
I'm gonna say this, and I mean this with all due respect. I ain't worried about the white kids. I'm talking about Black people. Black people. Wait a minute. Here we go. Racism is about institutional power. You don't have the institutional power. That's what I'm not worried about. We're talking about Black people, the black community. And I'm going to go back. Two things can be true.
I agree with Rashad. Two things.
Yeah. But again, how can we talk about anti-racist teaching and anti-racist education with the idea that some black people don't value education?
So
define value.
I asked
Sorry, Aaron.
No,
Sorry, Aaron.
again, that was the same question I asked you to define value earlier, right?
So if I was to I want to read this comment. I think we can say that blacks don't value education because we are part of the black culture. Some white people don't value education either, but we are worried about our children because no other culture is. That's powerful. You know, I honestly think if I can't be honest or if I can't hold my families accountable, then I'm doing them injustice. And I can't say, hey, we got to do better. If I can't say that, then I'm doing my community injustice by not being honest and not being forthright, by saying, hey, we got to do better by valuing our children's education so they can have opportunities that maybe we didn't have, our ancestors didn't have. We got to teach them how to value education. To me, nothing is wrong with that. And go ahead, David.
No. I want you to finish your thought.
So I'm saying, like, I've been in different states. You've been educated longer than me. Actually, you've been in education longer than me. I don't believe me saying that. So maybe if I say some of the black community doesn't value education, does that make it any better? Or I don't understand. Like, if I say some or few, does that really matter? It's us coming together, realizing that we got to do better. At the end of the day, it's we got to do better for our children. Like you said, David, they got to learn.
But you can. So what you just said, we have to do better. That's different than saying we don't value education. I'm with you 100%. We all have to do better. But I think when you keep when the either some, few, many black people don't value education, I think that in lines where some people may have a disagreement. I'm not here to say that you're wrong. I'm not going to place a right or wrong on your thoughts. What I'm saying is I think when people have an issue is when you make that comment, especially in this time. I think you can say we need to do a better job of putting our kids in a situation to be successful in education. That, in my opinion, is okay. I just struggle with this idea that the black community or some don't value education because, again, I go back to what we've been talking about, right? Like the entire system. Do you value things that aren't for you necessarily, right? Like, so to say black people don't value education, hell, this education ain't for us. I think black people value black education and good education for their children, right? But this education that some of these kids are getting, or the miseducation some kids are getting, hell no, they don't value it. Hey, I let alone value it, and I'm a principal of a school. You're a school leader, Ashley's a teacher. Like, but we still don't value. So I guess that's where this push comes. Again, this is great, right? Having this conversation, and the comments are lit.
And the comments they going in.
I'm trying to go back. Wait, so hold on real quick. My boy Vashawn said
sitting together
in the cafeteria. Dr. Tatum does say it will make it clear how both things can be true. Right. India said the belief that the black community doesn't value education allows for the continuation of a system of racism and white supremacy, and that puts us in this situation we're in. It's called a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I just don't see. I don't agree. I just don't see that.
Like, I'm about to text you this link in a minute. You about to get this link.
Bro, I just don't see. I don't see. Mm-hmm. I don't see that. And I respect India, and I love what she's doing at Thrive, and I love what she's done in her past. I just don't see how those two coincide. I just don't. I don't think nothing is wrong with wanting better for your people. To me, nothing's wrong with that. By being honest and wanting better for our people, by being honest, nothing's wrong with that.
This entire conversation result of anti-blackness that has been taught to us and everyone else for generations is learned racism. It's not that black people don't value education. There's a subset of the community that doesn't. Absolute statements are rarely correct. Next comment says, let's focus on how can we teach our culture to value education?
That's a good question.
How can we teach it? And again, I think as black school leaders, that's what some of us doing or trying to do with some of our schools, right? When I talked about, again, these schools and the system wasn't built for us and we're leading it, I think that's what most black school leaders are trying to do with their school models is we're trying to teach our culture to value education, right? There's a subset of every community that doesn't value education. We're going to run this video back and y'all will hear it clearly stated that black people
I remember it being stated.
Right.
Like,
and then let's talk about how we work to fix the issue instead of spending the energy pointing it out. All right, Vashawn, you must have saw my notes, bro. Because that was part of it. So in a case where we have schools that don't do well with anti-racist teaching or education. What do you guys see as the solutions to making sure that we get this and have this in our schools?
I like what you've done with your bringing your families in. I pay attention. And I like how you're bringing your families in.
I wouldn't be trying to save you.
Right. I love what you're trying to do, and you're bringing your families in. You're trying to show them this is how your child could be successful at Tyndall. That's what it takes. You're consistently, you're reaching your black, your brown, and your white children, and bringing them. Try to get the families in, staying late at night, bringing these families in, trying to show them, hey, this is how we work. This is what you do. This is how you be successful. This is what we need from you guys. That's where it starts. It takes you to these schools, bringing these families in, whether it's at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, bilingual people. It takes everyone bringing these families in and showing them how to do it. Like you've done. To me, you've done a great job, but you started that of a model of what it takes to do. That to me, that's what it means to teach our families how to value education, whether they're black, brown, or white.
So what about you? And Ashley, you work in my home district. Shout out to Pike Township, home of the Red Devils. We're gonna talk about that Red Devils on the show because we got.
But I'm a Giant for life, so let's not get
anyway, moving on. So Ashley, wait a minute, hold on. Shout out to my girl, my teacher of the year, Ashley Hogan. Someone does it bet. Period. Anyway, Ashley Ford. Again, when we think about how do we fix all the things that we talked about, right? Anti-racist teaching, anti-racist education, or just this idea, right? The question that was posed to help our children, our black kids, and our black families value education. What do schools need to do better?
Parental community involvement. I think the parents need to value education because I can't remember. I have to go back to the comments, but I've been thinking about this while you guys were talking, because I'm going to retract my statement when I said they don't value education. There are some students who don't, some families who don't. They value things that are more tangible, materialistic, and so if we take that energy into education, because I don't think children see the light at the end of the tunnel. They need instant gratification. They want to see, okay, what am I going to get out of this right now? As opposed to what can my education do for me once I, graduate high school or graduate college or even go to a trade school. As a former high school teacher, I always like college, get a college degree, get a college degree, get a college degree. Now I'm just like, hey, okay, school's not for you, but you're good with your hands. Go learn a trade. That's education too. You want to make money? Okay, let's figure out what can you do to get yourself out of your situation, whatever your social economic status is. So I think the parent community involvement and teaching families how to value education and why it's important, and then incorporating some of that anti-racist training, and that should be every day or more than once a year or however long.
So I'm gonna jump into these comments before I get my little tangent. Vashawn says, "Save them, sis." That's it. Let's educate our community. Absolutely. India spilled queso on her keyboard because she's trying to type and eat nachos because I got her fired up about black community.
I can't wait to see her. I can't wait to see her Twitter post later. I'm gonna respond to it.
I did see that you dropping free curriculum for folks.
That's true, India.
Yeah, I saw that free curriculum that you giving to folks. And then my girl Shanae, Candace Academy, my sister, call it my sister school. I call it my sister school. I came in late, but how was the value of education defined? We ain't defining it yet. We're gonna define it in our closing statements though. Is the base on parents not always showing up in ways educators expect? A level of involvement schools decide is appropriate. It is a privilege to even have been successful in education, and we do children, families, and communities a disservice by normalizing and perpetuating the myth that underserved communities are at fault for the lack of education success in their communities, and that is a lack of values. Man, listen, y'all coming through with this heat, man. We have to build positive relationships with families. You have to remember that many of these parents were also victims of the racist ass system. Damn, Andy, why I shouldn't even read it.
Yeah,
that was my
about that.
That was my piece. That was my piece, right? My piece was exactly that. It was this. It said, when I think about value, when I think about building this the parental engagement involvement, right? Particularly at Summit, right?
And
What
they
I
do
was
have a
trying to
distrust.
do,
I've seen
right?
it. Yeah.
What I was trying to do was I was trying to break, right, that ice, that stalemate, and bridge that gap between the school and the home that had been fractured, that many of these parents experienced in their own schooling, that they never saw their particular parents in the schools or involved in the schools, and they didn't know how to do it. So like they had all the best intentions, right? Which is why they sent them to our schools, right, to try to get them a better education. But when it came to the involvement piece, they just didn't understand exactly how to do it from a parent standpoint. And we would do them a disservice if, to Shanae's point, if we place a value on what we expected their involvement to be, right, and saying, because you don't meet this type of involvement, you're not engaged. But I said the same thing, like, it's all about how we support the parent, right, and how we build the relationship with the parents and build the love of education to them for their child, and then it trickles down. We know we're going to do right by the kids. We know that, right? I believe that most of the educators that I know, and I talk about the terrible ones, but most of the people that I know and I consider friends or colleagues or partners or brothers and sisters in this fight or kindred spirits in this fight, I believe that we're doing right by the children within our building. I think some of us have lost sight, or what we haven't focused on is how we're making sure that we repair the relationship that parents have with schools, because we can do all this work with kids in the school building, but when they go home to a home that where that is not reinforced, that's where the issue is. And so we have to do a better job of helping our parents reinforce education, but we do that by helping them define what type of education do you want for your child. I ask every new parent when they come to Summit, tell me what the education you want for your child, because it's my job to make sure that I tailor my school to fit the needs of your kids. Period. Right? We have a school motto and all this stuff, but our job is to make sure that we create an educational system that benefits the kids that walk in our building. And they're all going to come from different walks of life and different experience, and their parents are going to have different experience. But we have an obligation, right, and a commitment that we're going to tailor to what their needs are. And so Vashawn said there are Black parents who had PTSD because they were miseducated. They were miseducated. So when they come into the school or don't come into the school, because every time they come into the school, right, they get flashbacks of when that teacher
does that mean since they had PTSD, does that mean let up? Does that mean okay? I'm saying if they had a bad experience, does that mean here's where the problem? This is what I mean. Here's where the problem starts. I had a bad experience, so then I don't see the importance of it. So then my child's gonna have bad experience, and then it keeps going. And this is in the Black community, this is in the white community, this is in the Asian community, this is in all the communities. If someone has a bad experience, what tends to happen? It tends to evolve and revolve over and over and over again. Where does the cycle end? How do we end the cycle?
We end the cycle by bridging the gap, right?
Exactly.
And I think, like you said, like a lot of folks will say that because parents had a bad experience with school, we're gonna make an excuse for them, right? Well, that's why they don't show up. I'm not saying make an excuse for them. I'm saying do whatever you got to do to try to extend that reach and get them there, right?
Yeah.
And then when you get them,
that olive branch, you're absolutely right.
And then when you get them there, you make sure that you show them this is not the school that you grew up in or the school that you experienced, right? We're trying to build something different, but we can only build that in collaboration with you, right? And that's why we started Peak. Parents and educators alongside kids, right? To bridge the gap between home and school. Capitalize that B in Black, though. Capitalize that B in Black. I've seen a lot of that. Trauma-informed care includes adults as well. At 100%, like the reason why we got a school counselor, right, was not just for the kids. It was for the parents. And the teachers, right? Because even some of these teachers need some of this too, right? And so it goes both ways. Listen to the parents' wants and needs and move together in a collaborative way to ensure success of their scholar. That word right there, collaborative, right?
And I want to speak to, so one thing we have done this year, shout out to our team. We have these things called POPs that we're doing this year. So each of our coaches, teachers, we call them coaches, have a homeroom basically. And within that homeroom, our coaches are sitting down with families and students and developing POPs, personal learning plans, where they're talking about goals. They're talking about exactly what you said, what needs, like what do you want from us? What do you need from us to make sure your child's successful and you feel appreciated in the school? So this year, the biggest difference we made, and I think Indiana is also requiring schools to do this, is create these PLPs for these students and work with these families to determine how would they be successful in your school. Because guess what? At the end of the day, we're responsible for them. And when they leave the real world, I work at a high school. So I know when our kids leave, that I want to make sure that they're set up for success and that they're able to go on and be successful. And the families feel excited and they feel warm when they come into our building. So like I said, I definitely recommend the POPs. You're sitting down with families, you're setting goals, you're doing all that. And I feel like that makes a big difference. I'm sure India, they're probably doing that too there too. She knows she's at a high school. So I bet they're doing the same thing, but shout out to Thrival.
So, I had a question on here that I really wanted to get to, but we're at 50, but I'm going to just read it and I'm going to give my little quick. So the question was, how do we make sure, because it goes back to the whole idea of anti-racist teaching and education. So the question was, how do we make sure that teachers do not spend too much time trying to be professors of anti-racism and spend less time educating students on the skills they need to be successful academically? So it's this idea, right, that everybody now over this time has read all these anti-racist books and everybody's an expert on anti-racism. And so what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to walk in these classrooms and spit out all these facts and all this Black history facts that they've learned recently and share with their kids. And they're going to miss the mark on these kids did experience a COVID slide and a summer slide. And so we do have to at some point get back to the piece of educating our children. So my question to you are, how will you balance making sure that we are preaching the importance of anti-racist teaching, but also making sure that whether it's your role and as a leader, that you're teaching your teachers how to unpack a standard and use their pacing guide effectively, or actually as you as a teacher to make sure that you don't spend too much time, right, attending to their needs, that you make sure your students get the education they need from an academic standpoint. So how will you guys balance the two of making sure that you do have these anti-racist space, but also that kids are learning, because kids still got to learn?
I wrote down a couple of things, and to me, it's also when you want to provide enough opportunities for discussion and professional development. So if you're providing enough opportunities for that, then you really don't have to worry. There's some things that you don't have to worry about. If you're offering the opportunity, like even this podcast, or send people down, having group discussions about this, and providing the PD behind it will help. I said it's not just a one-time thing. And then to me, all this training, everything will lead to the results, hopefully, that you want. But it starts off with everything I said. You have to be intentional about it, and it's a lifelong commitment. It's a lifelong journey. And I said once that relationship is built, then we can build upon the other skills. So to me, at the end of the day, it comes down to relationships. Everything goes down to relationships, building that rapport with those students, with our teachers, with those families. And then once you build that relationship, then you can worry about the skills. To me, then the skills will start. The skills will come naturally. The skills will come naturally once all those other things are come first.
So Ashley, you are a special education teacher, right? And you talked in the beginning about some of the the trauma that your students come with. Right now, they're going to come with. Sorry.
You froze. Sorry.
Okay. I was gonna say, how are you gonna balance that, right? The trauma that they've experienced and have experienced, to also making sure that they get the education that is there. So how are you as a special education teacher gonna balance that this year coming up?
Well, you mentioned like the pacing guides and unpacking standards. There are just certain standards that I focus more heavily on because, like I said, I have lab classes. So in their gen ed classes, they're focusing on almost all the standards, or all the standards that the teachers can get to. And so I focus on certain standards, and then I try to find pieces of information to incorporate into my lesson. So I try to find those anti-racist, I might I might put a quote, or let's say read something. I know I use News ELA a lot, or commonly, or find, just stuff that happened in history, and let's have an open discussion. So I'm still hitting those standards, but also making sure I incorporate the lessons about teaching students how to be open-minded and be just towards people who look like them and people who do not look like them. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, absolutely. So we are at the hour point. So before we close out the show,
said this hour went quick. It did, girl.
I told you how the pre-show is gonna go by quick. Look, I'm gonna do my closing remarks, but before I do that, I want to give you guys the space, right? I always close out every show. I give folks the opportunity, whether they want to talk about a particular initiative they have or their school or whatever. But this, I'm gonna give you the floor and I'm gonna give you the solo screen to talk about whatever you want briefly to end it. You can go back and finish the thought that you didn't get to finish, or you can clarify a statement you made, whatever you want. I'm gonna give you the solo screen, give you a couple minutes to share your thoughts. So, Miss Ford, I'm gonna go with you first.
Oh, I went first last time. Let Aaron go.
Okay, Aaron. You know, Aaron, because there's a lot of folks that want to hear your final thoughts. So, I'm gonna give you the solo screen, and I'm gonna let you have your final thoughts.
I just want to give a thanks to David for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I love all the comments, and I just want to be clear. I love my Black community. I always will. I'm always going to push for us to be better no matter what. And I'm going to push for us to this is our country. And I want us to take over and build a bridge for the next generation. I have 2 girls, and best believe, like I said, like my brother, they're going to be woke and educated. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to set them up to live in this world. And shout out to Purdue Polytech. Come visit us, man. You want to talk about doing virtual and hybrid? We're doing it right. Like I said, it's not just sitting kids and computers. Time to do math, it's not time to do English. No, we incorporate skills into what we do to prepare our students for the real world. Whether it's college, military, trade, it's whatever. We incorporate skills in our everyday lessons. Come visit us out.
Thank you, Ashley. Solo screen. You got the solo screen.
Can I turn my camera off?
No,
I'm just kidding. Sorry. Yes. I appreciate you, David, for having me on. I've been following your podcast here for a while now. And like Aaron said, I love my Black community. I love my Black people. Let me retract my statement. I'm not saying that the entire Black community doesn't value education, because clearly we have a lot of Black people who do value education. I got into education because I love education. I love learning. And as a special ed teacher, I want to learn every day as much as I can so I can be a better teacher for my students. And then also still make sure that I build a relationship with the students, with the families, and make sure they don't have any PTSD from, their experiences with me as, their teacher of record, because by law, I'm required to make sure that these students get the services that are in their individualized education plans, but also, extend some empathy and grace to our kiddos during this pandemic, because it is hard. It's a trying time. We have a lot going on. We need to protect our Black men and women, because right now, it's like a war against us. And so we need to just, band together as Black educators and Black people to continue to push forward. And hey, we're gonna get it done. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna get these comments up real quick. Again, my boy Vashawn and Vashawn.
Excuse me.
We're gonna hide that. We're gonna let people know about the AOS podcast. I'm gonna put that in my closing statements. But anyway, first I want to say,
India, I need to get your contact information. I want to pick your brain.
Aaron and Ashley, I thank you guys for coming on. Ashley, I told you I was gonna get you on here, and I told you it was gonna be fun. Aaron, me, you,
I hope I didn't sound like an idiot.
No, absolutely not. Listen, your passion.
I can go on a tangent. I get started, honey.
Your passion spilled out. Aaron, me, you, and Alan, man, we talk a lot about the importance of a role that we stand as Black men and Black male leaders. I was fortunate enough to join the club of fatherhood, and so I got that perspective now as well. But I just want to thank you again. I appreciate you, man, for coming on. And Ashley, me and you go back. I always have love for you, and I appreciate you. Shout out to everybody that tuned in. But I want to let you know that tomorrow on the blog NDK12, because I got a blog, NDK12. I'm dropping a new blog. It's called Student Voices. School reopening from the perspective of students. So I have 8 college and high school students who are going to lend their voices to what they feel about school reopening, because again, we got to get them a part of this conversation. And next week, episode 14 of the Recess podcast will be called Student Voices. I'm going to have a high school junior, a high school senior, and a college sophomore on. We're going to talk about school reopening from their perspective. So tune in next week, August 20th, episode 14 of the Recess podcast called Two Student Voices. But if you didn't know from the banner, I want to say this again. Breonna Taylor's killers need to be arrested. We're not going to let up on that. So WAP that if you need to. And as my boy Bashan said, the AOS podcast is kicking off next Friday with the episode. Your boy's back in the producing role, so I'm excited about that. The AOS podcast. It's my boy Bashan, my boy Demetrius. Shout out to Unc who put us together. But the AOS podcast is bringing together 3 Black principals, males. And next week's episode for my Greek folks, we're gonna talk about the Panhellenic Civil Rights Council.
Oh, yeah, I know nothing about that.
The Panhellenic Civil Rights Council. So tune in to this episode. It's going to be fire. I'm on producing it. We're going to shout out A5A, because that's the oldest and the coldest. We're going to shout out the Alphas, the Kappas, the Sigmas, the Zetas, the Deltas, the AKs, the SG Row. We shout out the IOTAs, the whole.
Hey, them AKs might have someone in the office.
Hey, we shout out the whole Divine Nine next week on the AOS podcast. Again, that's 6 p.m. Eastern, AOS podcast. Follow us on Twitter, but you don't want to miss it. Again, this has been the Recess Podcast. I love everybody. Shout out to the comments. We did some great numbers. The education this time, again, we got an obligation, but our saying is the same. Create the platform, control the conversation, change the culture. Recess Podcast, we are out. All this fraternity love in the house, but we out. I appreciate everybody. Much love. We out.